So, yeah, hey everybody, it's Robert Van Valkenburgh here at Kogen Dojo with Topaz Navarro from Ground Control in Colombia. Out here for guest instructor Monday. I'm going to teach some De La Hiva stuff tonight. So thank you very much for coming out.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yep, I've been watching your podcast history, career, watching you travel around to different schools and stuff. And really admire the fact that you really get around in the jiu-jitsu community and train at all different places, especially with what you're doing with the military and stuff like that.
No, thank you.
So I wanted to have you out here to teach a class, to kind of talk to me a little bit about jiu-jitsu, and it's good to have you out.
All right, well, first of all, like I said, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to come out and teach, hang out, meet some new people, come to a new place. I think it's awesome. Second, for anybody that's dialing in from Workplay Obsession, the only thing you missed, Workplay Obsession, Life in Jiu-Jitsu. That's the name of the website and the podcast and Instagram and Facebook. So hit us up on there, Workplay Obsession, Life in Jiu-Jitsu. So, background a little bit?
Yeah, so how did you get into jiu-jitsu or martial arts in general? I mean, a lot of people start out in martial arts before jiu-jitsu.
Right. So, yeah, it kind of actually dives right into Workplay Obsession. So, started out with work. So started with the military, learning combatives, where the base there is jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and then we have, striking, Muay Thai, sticks, knives, guns, etc. So it started out as work, and then I began to play with it because I wanted to get better than my colleagues, because it's embarrassing to lose at work. And then, like anything else with martial arts, you become completely obsessed by being in the gym, training, meeting new people, going to new places. So that's where we went, Workplay Obsession, and just kind of going from there. So about 9 years now.
Nice.
I travel a lot, but I have one main school, like you mentioned, Ground Control in Colombia. So I've been there for 9 years, and that's about it.
Nice. And you're a brown belt down?
Yes.
Yeah.
I got my brown belt last November. Unfortunately, like right around the time I got it, I tore my pec at the same time. So spent about 3 months off the mat after that, and then I've been back since then, trying to get back in shape. So.
Well, this is actually an interesting sort of tangent, but with injuries in jiu-jitsu, a lot of people have different opinions on how you handle them. Like, do you just train light? Do you not train at all? Do you come in the gym and watch, jiu-jitsu? I mean, how did you handle 3 months of being injured after 9 years of being on the mat?
So it's interesting because I think different people are going to handle different injuries in different ways. So in this case, the same person handled different injuries in a different way. So I had a knee injury, I had knee surgery, but I trained through the entire thing. I played half guard on the opposite knee for essentially 3-4 months, whatever it was. So that time I just worked through the entire injury. With this torn pec, I couldn't really do anything with it.
Yeah.
Luckily, it was only partial, so I didn't have to have surgery, and I was out for 3 months, and basically I did a lot of leg stuff, cardio, and then started to lift again. So yeah, two different ways to kind of handle it, but definitely I started photography the first time too, and then that's where I picked up the podcast. So I couldn't leave the gym, so I figured out what could I do while I was there. So,
right.
Yeah, picked up some new hobbies.
Yeah, well, I mean that's good. I think sometimes injuries are our body's way of telling us to pick up other hobbies, and take up other hobbies. I mean, I know that my back was hurt really bad for a while. I was in an accident with work, and people were we were training at my house, so people were still coming to my house to train. But actually, I took that time to really observe the way jiu-jitsu worked from like a very stepped back, objective level, and I really had some interesting sort of realizations about principles in jiu-jitsu that I never would have understood if I was right in the middle of it.
Right.
It's so, as long as it is your obsession, like like your podcast says, then you're gonna find a way to make the best of the time off the mat, I think.
I think sitting back and observing sometimes, it's just as important as being there. You notice details. I mean, obviously you can't practice them right away, but you'll notice details or finer points that you were missing. So it is good, and it's always positive to be around the team, whether it's for little pick-me-ups or things like that. But depression's real, right? So if you take someone who trains all the time and now all of a sudden they can't, people will slip into a depression of not being out there with the guys. So just being around the gym, it helps as well.
Well, that's a lot of people that I know in jiu-jitsu talk about that it helps them with depression, and
absolutely,
it's something that it's not something people talk about on their way into jiu-jitsu, I don't think, but once you've been in jiu-jitsu long enough, or any martial art, I didn't start with jiu-jitsu, and I don't only train jiu-jitsu, but I know that there's a direct correlation between my active participation in martial arts and the depression that I would otherwise have if I weren't able to do it. And that's not to say that we're doctors, we're not psychiatrists. This isn't group therapy, but there's something about the positive human interaction, both physical, mental, emotional, whatever, that really seems to help a lot. I mean, is that something you've suffered from personally, or just when you were kind of off the mat for a while?
Just kind of being off the mat for a while, and really it really takes me to off on a tangent for our conversation, but really my main intent of training and continuing to train. So I tell myself, while I may or may not have my own place one day, I want to be heavily involved with the location who provides that support to veterans and first responders, because what happens is we use jiu-jitsu as a medium to bring people together, right? So you can address depression, you can address suicide awareness and suicide prevention, which last week, yesterday was Sunday, so it was at the Howard County Out of Darkness Walk, and it's one of those efforts that I support because, just as you pointed out, you bring together like-minded individuals that have a chance to bond. So aside from what we were talking about earlier, having realistic combat training, that is one aspect, and then the other aspect that I fully support is having the ability to reach out to veterans, active duty, military, law enforcement, whatever the case may be, and say, hey guys, here's a place where you can come together and forget all that other stuff, or if you want to go the other way and talk about things in the past or talk about what's on your mind, and we spend time together that way. So two really big things for me.
Yeah. Well, so were you in the service?
Yes.
Yeah.
You
still are.
Yep.
Okay. So you're active duty,
yes,
or
active duty.
Yeah. Okay. What branch?
Army.
Yeah. And so when you're traveling with doing jiu-jitsu and stuff like that with the service, is that directly related to that, or that's sort of what you're doing on the side while you're doing other stuff?
Completely on the side. Yeah. So this is a vision more than anything. Although I try to reach out on Instagram and through the website and through Facebook to reach out to as many people as I can. Eventually, we will have that kind of area or that arena where we can say, hey, something like, I don't know if you ever heard of Gis for GIs. Some of you out there may have heard for Gis for GIs. If not, please look it up. What they do is they take donated Gis and they send them out to deployed service members or to service members that can't afford Gis, and that way they don't have to use their uniforms, get their uniforms torn up. And it's actually run by a former Baltimore ground control Owings Mills guy, Brian Crandall. He lives out in North Carolina. Great job getting. He's gotten hundreds, thousands of Gis out to people at this point.
Awesome.
And so through supporting efforts like that, that's what really is what I'm really striving for.
Yeah.
And notice none of that has to do with competition or really training jiu-jitsu.
Or politics or affiliations.
Oh gosh, please don't get me started on that part.
But that's the point. I mean, that's a lot of the point of having people come out on Monday nights out here, or like when you're traveling, and training, that there's something bigger going on, that all of the pettiness and all of the selfishness, really, there's no room for it.
Right.
And not in the 21st century, not in the age that we're living in now.
The interesting piece is the jiu-jitsu community is so small. Tim Spriggs had a comment on Instagram, I think it was yesterday or over the weekend, and I completely agree with his sentiment. He said jiu-jitsu will never grow to the level that most people aspire. It's going to be more of it'll be like the skateboarding community.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with what he was saying. So when you take a community that's that small, there's no room for infighting.
Right.
You have to support each other so that the sport will continue to grow at whatever rate, but at least it will sustain itself.
Yeah. And if the people that are infighting, the interesting thing is that the culture will just move on without them.
Yes, absolutely.
It's not that the culture is going to slow down and say, well, why are you infighting? It's just going to keep moving. And it's one of the things that I really love about what we're trying to do here, and what it's obvious that you're trying to do as well. So I asked you this question earlier. I kind of told you that I would ask you this question earlier. When thinking about jiu-jitsu, now you're 9 years in, and obviously you train different places with different people and with different instructors. So what is it that you wish you knew when you started, or what is it that you wish that you'd focused on when you started that maybe would have made a much bigger impact on your jiu-jitsu than what you did focus on, or what you did learn?
So it's pretty interesting. We talked about this prior to, and I was kind of stumped. Originally, I thought, I would focus more on self-defense, but I think we did a decent job of doing that at the different places I trained at. But I thought about it, and if I could go back and change anything, don't ignore 50% of the human body.
Leg locks.
Yeah, that's one thing I would change if I went back. I would start the leg lock game a lot earlier. I know a lot of places still think that it's I don't know, dark side or whatever you want to call it, man.
Right.
But it's almost like an American thing, right? So if you let's look at basketball, right? They had the Euro step. Mm-hmm. When the Euro step came to America, everyone said, that's trash, that's traveling, that's garbage, get it out of here. Now you look at the NBA, how many guys are doing the Euro step in the NBA? It's huge. So it's the same thing here where you're like, okay, now you have all these wrestlers, now they all want to do takedowns, and now they want to do, lay and pray and MMA, and now everybody's doing leg locks. It's like you have to adapt and evolve, and it just makes everything whole, So it's that would be my one thing, and I enjoy it, so it's fun.
Well, and as we were discussing earlier, even if what you're focused on in jiu-jitsu is not leg locks personally, mm-hmm. it's good to be at a school where they are practicing them so that your jiu-jitsu will improve, like in accordance with what is going on in the school. Right. So while you're focused on becoming an expert in leg locks, if I'm focused on becoming an expert in whatever side control, collar chokes, or whatever it is, break cutter chokes, then I'll learn how to defend your leg locks while I'm getting really good at the bread cutter chokes, and then we kind of feed back and forth.
You kind of grow up. You feed off each other and you grow. Absolutely. Even if you don't intend to ever apply, if you never want to go, to inside senkaku and start to attack and stuff, recognizing it and being able to defend it and then go to where you want to go to is really success for you.
Being able to impose your game on a game that's equally as good.
Yeah, exactly. So that would be one thing I'd address.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. That's not what I would have expected. So we were discussing. I think Boo's got the warm-ups going, or still the little kids going on, or the big kids going on out there. So we got a few minutes. But you were talking about jiu-jitsu as it relates to the military.
Yes.
And how the focus is different than, the idea that jiu-jitsu is effective martial art is sort of, it's a given at this point. If you don't understand that Brazilian jiu-jitsu is an effective martial art, then you've not been paying attention. But dojo jiu-jitsu is not the same as combative training when someone is dealing with firearms and knives and multiple people on a battlefield, which is something that you have to deal with in the military.
Right.
So how does your training differ when you step into the military arena versus a jiu-jitsu school? So
one thing I'm a big fan of, once you establish and you can build and maintain the fundamentals, which is a difficult piece because there's so many other aspects of training going on, I think you have to integrate scenario-based training. Without scenarios, you fall into the same kind of rut, I'll call it for lack of a better term, as you would in a traditional gym.
Yep.
I've seen scenarios where you could have two guys that are grappling and then introduce a weapon at halfway through, and one guy will just have paralysis by this new item that's in the scenario, and the other guy who's trained through the scenario before knows to either acquire that weapon and use it, or take that weapon and get it off and out of the scenario, or whatever you do, but it's just from experience. And I think that's one of the key pieces that we miss when we only train in a right. We have to think about business, right? So we're not thinking about wearing kit and tearing up someone's mats and all those other things. So once you add those into the equation, that's what we look at more from a combative standpoint with regards to the military.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we were discussing a little bit as well about how even the positions that you're going for are going to change based on the scenario that you find yourself in, and if weapons are involved and things like that. That's something like a back mount with hooks in and a seatbelt grip. While that's very dominant when you're going for submissions, it's not necessarily desirable when there's 3 guys standing over top of you that want to kick your head in.
Yeah, I tell guys this all the time. This is my personal preference, and you know, different strokes for different folks. But I prefer to maintain almost a neon belly type position, or I call it an offshoot of north-south, kind of at that 45-degree angle. But most of the time, ideally neon belly, because that way I can keep my head on a swivel. I can assess the entire scene, and then if need be, I can get up to transition to something else, or I can get up to run if I'm right. You know, if that's my goal.
Running is undervalued in jiu-jitsu.
So yeah, there is that perspective that you build in as well. Someone, I can't remember whose article it was, but it was like train like a grappler, but don't be a grappler. You know, and things like that are things that stick with you when you're like, man, I could have gotten out of this scenario here, but I transitioned to this because I have this grappling mindset, and now I'm in closer contact with this guy when I could have fled the situation. So another way I kind of look at it too.
That's a good perspective. The guy that teaches our first responders jiu-jitsu classes here, Ike, he's a black belt here. When I first started training with him a long time ago, I was either a white belt or a blue belt, and he was I think still a purple belt. But I remember trying to pass his guard, and every single time I tried to pass his guard, I would get 90% passed, and then I get swept. And finally, after like 5 attempts, he looked at me and said, "Look behind you." I was like, "What are you talking about?" He said, "There's a whole world behind you. Like, why aren't you going backwards? You're not, you know, it's like, you're allowed to do that." But it's just one of those things that actually that ties back into the scenario-based training. That if sometimes the scenario should be get up and run instead of trying to pass the guard, or you know, whatever it happens to be. You know,
you can even look at it sometimes from a competition perspective too, right? So if you take a guy who has no takedown skills or very limited takedown skills, and you can look at a situation where there's enough space for this guy to come to his feet, and now he can take the guy down, and now he's on top. Whereas because he's failed to train takedowns, which was my case for quite a long time, being honest, he's waiting for this guy to engage so that he can set up a sweep to get himself on top. Where you could have stood up,
just done that from the beginning,
and attacked, and you would have been on top. So that's the way you can look at it from a competition standpoint too. It's like, hey, there's space, get up. Why are you, get up?
Right.
So it's another way to look at it.
You've been a pretty active competitor in your jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, not recently, but sporadically throughout the years. Yeah.
What is it that
Not
you
very
think
good,
that what is it that competition offers from that perspective of both the military and the sport jiu-jitsu perspective? Like, how does competition kind of bring that together, or is it kind of its own thing?
I think the key benefit, in my opinion, of competition is I'll say stress, but really it's the adrenaline. Like, and people train, and they get out there, and then they're like, oh my gosh, why have I been competing for 30 seconds and I've already lost my grip? I can't even feel my forearms are on fire. It's been 30 seconds. That's to me, that's the benefit of competition. To be honest,
So you were talking a little bit earlier about that this is sort of a slow season for competition, and you have some special stuff that you're working on right now, some projects that you're working on right now, specifically because of the gap.
Yeah, awesome. So guys, if you haven't heard about the expedition series I'm doing, some of you guys have already reached out to me. Josh Peters, I'm going to come out and see those guys, definitely. I'm going to go hang out with Mateo and the guys at Abmars. I'm always at Standard whenever I can sneak in there when those guys invite me. So guys, my plan is every weekend, either Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, I'm going to visit a different gym, open mat, and just hang out and see who truly has the best open mat. And one thing I pointed out, though, when I say best, I don't mean they have the most black belts out there or the most people that can beat me. I think the best is the quality of folks, the friendship, the camaraderie, and then the people that are willing to share their experiences and just to talk. I think, to me, that makes a really great open mat. So that's going to be between now and probably New York Open. That's what I'm shooting for next. Also, Dominion, I'm going to be out there for Cosmic Rolling Halloween. I don't know if have you ever done a Cosmic Rolling event? Awesome event. Bill Nagel's out there, Michelle Welty. They invite me out all the time. They drop the lights. They have black lights. People are wearing like white gis and like it's all spooky and stuff. Music's playing. It's pretty cool. Nice. I believe that's October 26th. Okay. That's a Friday. I'm going to be out there for that. But yeah, every weekend I'm looking for someplace else to go and train with some people.
Well, I can't say that we have the best open mats. We just started, and our open mats are actually very small. But we do have an 8 a.m. open mat every Saturday, which
Nice.
is pretty early for a lot of people. But we actually started it when we were training at my house it was the guys that were training all had kids, and they wanted to be able to get their training in before everybody was up and going, so they could get back and have breakfast with their families.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, we call it rise and roll. So we get up in here, get some rolls in, get out, and right after that's actually yoga. For some people stick around for yoga, and then we also have an 11:30 no-gi open mat on Sundays, which it's been pretty slow because there's some really good open mats on Sundays apparently. I know we've had a lot of people from Baltimore BJJ in here, and they have a really good open mat on Sundays, I've heard. So, but if you're in Anne Arundel County in the Severna Park area, anybody, 8 a.m. Saturday, 11:30 Sunday. And sometimes the Sunday one, this might scare people away. Sometimes we put gloves on, put mouth guards on, and kind of play around with from that perspective as well. So, anything else you got going on you want to talk about before we get on the mat?
No, that's really it, man. Like I said, if you guys want to hit me up, whether it's on Instagram or Facebook or on the website Workplay Obsession, let me know when your open mats are, and then I'll reach out to you. We'll schedule something so I can get out there and train. I'm interested in coming here on one of these Sundays with the gloves on and seeing that how it works out. That sounds like fun. Yep.
Cool. Well, so go to workplayobsession.com.
Yep, for the website. Yep.
Ground Control Columbia.
Yeah, I think so. They're groundcontrolusa.com.
Okay.
Yep. And you can reach, I think, all their gyms. You can reach from that location.
Okay.
Also, guys, on Instagram, Workplay Obsession, and then on Facebook, Workplay Obsession. Yeah, I'm all over it, man. Writing all the time, posting all the time, trying to stay active within the community. So
nice. Well, it's awesome to have you. And
no, thanks for having
as
me.
always, check out www. I don't even know why we say www anymore. Check out KogenDojo.com. We're at 549 Baltimore Annapolis Boulevard in Severna Park, right in the middle of Anne Arundel County, just a little bit north of Annapolis, south of Glen Burnie for people that know where those places are. We have guest instructors out here every Monday. Next week is AJ Rosales from Pure Performance out in Rockville, Pedro Sauer School, and then got some other people coming out. And we also have a couple new brown belts that are teaching here every week too. That they were training here and now they started picking up some classes. So we're really excited to have that. I mean, we're such a new school to have the amount of brown belts and black belts that are in here is pretty amazing for us. But always
thank you.
Gonna have a lot of